Hello, friends. One of the things that I encounter most often hearing life confessions and doing family counseling and marital therapy, talking to couples, all these things is how much a role childhood and environment plays into a person, and specifically the passions, what are known as sins, that afflict that person and negatively affect their life. So I wanted to go through a few reasons why it's not us just struggling against our quote unquote own demons, but really, honestly, we are struggling against the demons of our family and sometimes the same exact demons that our parents were afflicted with. But first, I wanted to look at the inclination of a child. The inclination. Are children born good or bad? Now, I don't mean this in the moral sense or a juridical sense because children don't have any sin. But when we read the Holy Fathers, it's very clear from them that children have an inclination to the good. In fact, generally speaking, mankind as a whole, although it is tempted and falls into sin, still desires to have a good experience of life. People are not all wholeheartedly evil and doing evil things and committing atrocious sins and whatnot. Generally speaking, people are inclined towards the good. In fact, Christ addresses this in the gospel when he talks about the Gentiles. Even the Gentile fathers, when their children ask them for a loaf of bread, don't give them a rock, right? Parents, generally speaking, love their children. There are, of course, outliers, but generally speaking, parents love their children and want the best for them and want the best for their life. So when we're dealing with children from a young age, although they may pick up some proclivities and have some selfishness and tantrums and different things that they're struggling with, generally speaking, they're loving and they want to be good, but they're born into an environment. And so often our environment dictates our outlook and our view of the world. So you take one child in a family that's calm and stable and peaceful, and you're around that child and you find what? The child is, for the most part, well-adjusted and calm and stable. You take another child from a family where the parents are fighting and there's yelling and there's screaming and all these other things that are happening. And what happens? The child is very emotionally dysregulated. They don't really know how to approach life because they don't have anything that they can emulate. And we know this. Children, generally speaking, don't listen to what we tell them. They actually are observing and watching the example that we set. And so our goal, obviously, as parents or future parents, is to create an environment that produces healthy children. But when we're born into an environment that is tumultuous, that has an effect on us. There is no two ways around this. In fact, so much of this childhood, what people call trauma, which is, some of it is just life and dealing with people, and then some of it is genuinely traumatic. But the reality is that when we're in those situations or circumstances that are less than ideal, we don't have the possibility to mature into adulthood in many ways because the people around us are very emotionally, mentally, and interpersonally immature. And so we don't have a set example of what that looks like. We don't know what is normative. So many times I find in talking with couples, I ask them, what were your parents like? How did they interact? And you can see this correlation. Somebody comes from a family, they say, well, in my family, we would all get mad at each other and kind of yell and blow up, and then we just wouldn't talk for hours or days, and then everybody would just basically forgive each other and move on. And then you see them in their marriage, and they're exhibiting this same behavior because that's what they've come to learn is normative family behavior. And so environment shapes a person because of the passions and the virtues of their parents. Hello, friends. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you'd like to take that next step in supporting my wife to get a Ford Transit van for our 6 children, please check out our online group called The Narrow Path. It's hosted at school.com/Father Moses. We have courses on marriage, on dating, the spiritual life, interviews. I answer questions in a weekly video Q&A. I'd love to see you there. Thank you so much. God bless. The passions, or what people in the West call sins, are those illnesses of the soul. like lust and greed and anger, sloth, jealousy. These things are shaping a person because there are very real demons that influence people into doing bad things. In fact, I cannot tell you how many life confessions I've heard where somebody references an addiction to bad online material that start with, I found my dad's XYZ on the computer. I found something in their room. I discovered this. They didn't get it from nowhere. And a lot of times they didn't get it just from the internet. Now, there are occasions where people got exposed from other people, but I cannot tell you how many times somebody was exposed to that demon of lust because that demon of lust was living in their home. Their parents, and many times their father, was enslaved to that demon of lust. And all of the things that came with it came into the home. I often tell people this, that you have to fight these demons not just for your own sake, but for the sake of your children. Because the demons, when you let them into your home, do not differentiate. They attack and try to get everyone. And so, again, when the parents have a passion with alcohol, what has so often been told to me? Well, my parents were having a party and everyone was drunk and nobody was watching me, and that's when I first started drinking. So these passions are very real because they are linked with demonic influence and sometimes even to the degree of demonic presence. Many times I have heard someone say, my mother was into tarot card reading, or she was into witchcraft, or she was into the occult to some degree, and they describe scenarios in their house, feeling a dark presence, sometimes seeing something, trouble with their dreams, all of these different things, all because they grew up in that environment where the demons were let into the home. And when the demons are let into the home, they try to get everyone. Likewise, when the parents are striving for virtue and they're living a virtuous life and they're trying to communicate and love each other well and carry their cross and be sacrificial and hardworking, when they're cultivating those things, you see it in the children. The children have to say, well, I'm hardworking because my dad was hardworking. I saw an example. My parents modeled for me the right way to communicate with other people. They taught me emotional intelligence. They taught me emotional regulation because they modeled it for me and they articulate it to me. One of the hardest things about growing up in a family with no emotional balance, which is unfortunately what I grew up with, is that as a child you start to look at the parents and you realize they don't really have this figured out and they don't know how to interact with life. And so likewise, I don't know how to interact with life also, because what would I even ask them? If they can't cope with their problems, how can they possibly teach me to cope with mine? And last but not least, resentments. The devil feeds on unforgiveness. So many people who hate their parents and hate what their parents did, sadly, fall into those same sins. It's like anger and resentment and unforgiveness just opens the door to demonic energy and influence. And so somebody will say, I hate my dad for being an alcoholic. They resent him. They can't stand him. And then they get exposed to alcohol, and alcohol starts to have the same effect on them that it did on their father. And so many years later, they're battling an alcoholic addiction, all because, in part, I should say, because there is that deep-seated unforgiveness. In fact, when you look at the work of the 12-step programs, one of the foremost aspects of the 12-step programs is getting rid of unforgiveness and resentments because they block us off from the power of God. God loves and forgives us, and he wants us to forgive others. And when we are unforgiving, it cuts us off from divine help. And so it is, brothers and sisters, whatever environment that we were raised in, whatever passions that our parents had, we must forgive them and, as adults, seek to transcend that. I remember in my own life that I was 24, 25, and I had this deep-seated resentment towards my father. He was mostly an absent father growing up emotionally. There were lots of problems. And I realized at 25, my childhood was over. It was gone. All the things that I wish I had with my dad, the experiences, the relationship, all of that was gone. It never happened. I'm never going back in time. It's never going to exist. But I realized all of my anger towards him was now affecting me in adulthood. And so it was like I was carrying all that trauma from the past, all that hurt into the present, and it was turning me into somebody that was full of anger and bitterness and was uncontrolled emotionally. And when I look back, what did I see? My father had the same relationship with his father. His father was very terrible to him. And it was just so abundantly clear that he had this deep-seated wound from his own childhood that he never healed. And then here I was, basically a third generation, dealing with the same stuff that my probably grandfather was dealing with in relationship to his father. And all that demonic energy was being passed down generationally, all those passions, all that unforgiveness, all that hurt and that bitterness. And then here I was, and I'm wanting to start a family. And I have all this garbage from the past. The first place that I started was with forgiveness. Letting go of everything that I lost out and missed out and didn't happen in my childhood that I wish happened. But the reality was I had to move forward into adulthood. And the only way for me to start with a clean slate and not repeat the sins of my father was to get rid of those memories, those thoughts, that resentment, that bitterness, that anger, so that I could start fresh and build something with Christ that would change and transform and end that multi-generational trauma. We have to be so diligent in this aspect of forgiveness. And then we really need to seek out and find people who can help us mature and grow into adulthood. Our priests in the church, in the Orthodox Church, by and large, are awesome examples of this. Emotional regulation, forgiveness, calm under fire, and being in the fight. We need to find men, especially if you're a young man, to help shape and guide you. And if you're a young woman, it's so key and imperative to spend time with the women in the church who have children, to see how they parent, to experience modeling. This will transform and change, which was once suffering from the demons of your childhood, into the hope of Christ and the new life that he gives to us. God bless you.